morning, everyone, and welcome into First Things First. I'm Jenna Wolfe. That's the Hall of Famer Cris Carter, and this is Nick Wright. It is Friday. We made it to the end of the week. We made it to week 2 of the preseason.
Yes, we did.
So we have a stacked show full of preseason goodness. A lot of football to get to. Aaron Rodgers is officially back. Sam Darnold may have hit pause, and Tom Brady is Tom Brady. And that's where we will start. Brady entering what feels like his 300th season, making his preseason debut. Not just a few series to get the feel. He got extensive action last night, played the entire first half, played like Tom Brady. Completed 19 of 26 passes for 2 touchdowns, completed passes to 7 different receivers, including Cris Carter, who was at home on his own couch last night. That's how good he is. Here is Tom Brady after the game.
Who's ever out there, whether the last 3 weeks, you're just trying to get on the same page. You know, we're not doing a ton of game planning for these games, and it's just some trust, and the prayer is mostly about us. But who's ever out there, we got to go with, and I'm sure it'll be that way at different points in the season. New guys will come in, and got to try to get them ready. And obviously, all the reps we put in with, Julian, Hogs, Gronk, guys who have been here in the past are very helpful. But everyone's just trying to get up to speed, and we're trying to all do the right thing.
All right, Cris, you watched this game. What impressed you the most about Tom Brady last night?
Well, you can see that they made a conscious effort, Josh McDaniel, to be able to get the ball out of Tom's hand very, very quick. And also you could see from an offensive line standpoint, they threw a number of screens that you wouldn't see a team like New England, a veteran, a couple of jailbreak screens in case they get pressure. You could see them practicing on things that they think that they might need during the regular season. And also you could see Tom trying to fill out the other receivers and give them opportunities. You could see him spreading the ball around because, as he mentioned, there in the soundbite, yes, they haven't had that cohesiveness. They haven't had a lot of reps. But one thing I saw also in the telecast, or heard in the telecast, it was nice to get the New England feed, was that Tom has missed some time in practice that people hadn't reported. So not only we knew that Edelman was going to miss some time during the season, but they had kind of kept that under wraps, that he had a sore back. That's typically not something that we have seen from Tom. So that was it was very intriguing to be able to see the beginning of the game, because I thought the game plan was very, very aggressive. I don't know how much Tom's going to play the rest of the preseason, right, but they went into this game with a lot more emphasis on game planning. Let's get the ball around. Patterson, let's see if we can get him the ball and screen passes. Let's see, James White moved him out of the backfield early. That's a regular season thing. So I was impressed of how they attacked it. And also I could see that Tom might not play too much more the rest of the preseason.
It's interesting that Brady said, we're not game planning for these games. And I know you're not. But man, oh man, it looked like they had the perfect game plan against that Eagles front, against a team that is going to be aggressive, get after the quarterback. The Eagles potentially trying to take advantage of a young or banged up or new England offensive line. It became banged up during the game. We know the left tackle situation has been in flux. And the Patriots had the perfect antidote to that. It was jailbreak screen. It was regular screen. It was the misdirection screen. It was every type of screen you could see, they ran at super successful levels. Brady had, 170 yards passing on 19 completions, but not a whole lot of yards through the air. It wasn't deep passes downfield. It was a lot of yards after catch, them taking advantage of a very talented and very good Eagles front. But the thing that I had 2 enormous takeaways. One is this guy is simply unbelievable. That
Which
Tom Brady,
different than where you were a year ago at this very same moment.
100%. I always knew he was unbelievable, but I was waiting for age to do what it has done to every NFL player ever, and he still seems to be holding it off. I understand that Father Time, to use the cliche, is undefeated, but maybe it's going to be an old 100-round bare knuckles boxing match with Brady instead of a normal 15-round KO.
Right.
So one is Brady's continues to be great, and the other is Cordarrelle Patterson, because he's an intriguing player for them. He's a guy that was a first-round pick for Minnesota. If you remember his rookie season, it looked like, This is going to be a quality first-round pick. He was an electric kick returner. As soon as he learns how to be a wide receiver, he's going to be the guy. And he never quite learned how to be the wide receiver. They used him not only on a touchdown, but on a long play that got them inside the 3-yard line on a quick swing pass out to the left. And so I think he could be interesting for a team that needs speed.
Cece, you and I were talking earlier this morning about that offensive line and that it concerns you for Tom Brady's sake that he is going to obviously feel the pressure and it's going to be a little bit harder for him in the early going of this season.
Yes, I mean, they're going to miss Nate Solder. I mean, when you can put a guy on Tom's backside, as much as they like to throw the ball and throw it quick, and how many different formations they need, you need veteran players to be able to do that because Tom does a great job with the center, David Andrews, as far as changing protections. But you're limited. It's just like wide receivers. When you don't have guys with experience, you don't have the variety of the different protections, just like the different routes you have with the wide receivers. And that's what they're going to be fighting this year. We saw Isaiah Wynn, the rookie. He even got nicked in this game.
More than nicked. I mean, he's carted off. If people weren't watching it, he's carted off. So we don't know how serious it was, but it seemed substantial to
Nick Wright, you have to amputate. A football injury, that was a nick.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
But, you know, he struggled a little bit at left tackle. How do I know that? Because in the offseason and in the first couple weeks of training camp, he was going between left tackle and right tackle. Now, he didn't play in week number 1 in the preseason, played in week number 2, and played at right tackle. So it lets me know. Typically, you do not like to move a guy from left to right. And if he has to settle on one, you prefer him to settle at left because you know the type of player and type of athlete over there. When they made him settle on the right side, it makes me wonder he must have some struggles on that left side. So that offensive line is what I'm going to watch. When they get Gronk and get Edelman back, they're going to be dangerous because they have Tom Brady. But you could see they're not going to be a dominant running team. They're going to throw the ball quick, and then do some play action, try to get the ball down the pump seams.
I mean, in Isaiah Wynn, people should know he's the guy they picked with the pick they got in the Brandon Cooks trade, pardon me. When they traded away Brandon Cooks, that extra first rounder is how they drafted Isaiah Wynn. They needed to upgrade defense, but they knew they had lost Nate Solder. They decided to take a guy they thought could help them right now, and he was a guard in college, but he profiled as a tackle in the pros, ideally a left tackle. You take a guy that high for a team that loses its left tackle, you hope he's there. And now we see him miss week 1, as CC mentioned, and then carted off from the sideline in week 2. One other note on a positive standpoint for the Patriots last night, absent of Brady. Their offseason acquisition, Adrian Claiborne. He's the one that came around and ended up injuring Nick Foles. He came around and the strip sack on him. The increased pressure up front, because we had mentioned yesterday, where did the Patriots get better offensively last year to this year? It's hard to find a room that the position group is better. Defensively, maybe that D-line, Derek Rivers coming back after injury, Adrian Claiborne being an increased role, maybe that is a place that they could be a little bit better than last year.
Why did Belichick play Tom Brady for a first half? Is there something he was looking for? Did they want to test out his back? Is he just, I mean, what is it about?
I think it's a combination of things. Tom's missed a lot of time. Him and Belichick had agreed Tom wasn't going to be there in the offseason for the things that weren't mandatory. And also, you could hear in the local telecast with the Patriots broadcast team that Tom had missed time in the first week of camp because of a stiff back. Now, we don't know. Typically, week number 3 is the stage week for NFL games. They like to play their starters, like to play them typically through the first half and start the third quarter. They might have moved that to week number 2 because of the way the offseason has gone with Tom. Last night was not the typical preseason game for the New England Patriots. You can see the intensity on their face from the time they ran on the field with Tom running on with the typical without his helmet and his little buddy Edelman. He came out firing and everything. So I thought they put a little more emphasis on this game than they normally would.
I hesitate to ask you this because I think I know the answer, but I feel like the audience is asking it, so I'll take the bullet. Anything of that extra intensity, the Brady playing longer, has to do with the opponent, that this is the team that beat them in the Super Bowl?
No, I just think it's the sequence for which training camp has gone. They've had a couple injuries, and week number 2 or 3 is going to be those weeks. Belichick decided to go in week number 2. No, but they were moving at a different speed than the Philadelphia Eagles were.
And we should mention all that chirping by Lane Johnson, and we didn't see anything really between Lane Johnson and these two teams as far as tension, if you will, on the field. All right, we'll talk more about this. Eric Mangini will join us. But on the other side, how will Nick Foles' injury impact Carson Wentz? That's next. This is First Things First. New topic now. We saw what Tom Brady did last night against the Eagles. The Eagles' Nick Foles did not fare nearly as well against the Patriots. Shaky start, came out a little rusty, some questionable throws, and then took a hit to his throwing arm. He had to leave the game with a sore shoulder. He will undergo tests on that shoulder later today. If neither he nor Wentz can go next week, it's Nate Sudfeld time. Cece, how much would a Foles injury impact the Eagles season with Wentz uncertain for week 1?
Well, one of the things that we talk about Philadelphia and the reason why we think they're the best team is not just based on scheme, how they're going to go after people, but it's based on the amount of depth that they have at key positions. We saw last year defense, linebackers. We saw offensive line, key left tackle. We saw quarterback. We saw running backs out of the backfield, Sproles. We saw so many people get injured for them. So that's the reason why Howie Roseman and his staff there have done a tremendous job. Now, does it affect when the starter comes back? It might affect it, but I thought Carson Wentz was going to be ready week number 1, but I believe it's going to affect the reps in practice more so now because Carson Wentz hadn't done a lot of 11-on-11, and Nick Foles has been taking those reps. So now does Carson Wentz, because you only have 2 weeks left until the regular season, do you start getting him into 11-11? I think that's where the adjustment comes from a practice time. But I believe Carson Wentz will be the starter week number 1.
It wouldn't bother me at all if they adjust practice time. And if you're right, see, that it was always the plan for Wentz to start week 1, I know that was their hope. But that if that was the timeline before this injury, then great. But I would not allow this injury to affect. I wouldn't make it rush. I wouldn't rush Carson Wentz because of this. Like, he's too important.
Whatever the medical staff, whatever prescription that they've given, they're not going to deviate from that. So it's not as if something happened in the game, and then now they're going to meet with Carson and be like, you know something, Carson, we're going to speed up your recovery. I believe that he was out there the first day of training camp. All right? There is no way that he shouldn't be there for the first game of the regular season given that injury unless he has some type of setback that we haven't heard anything about.
So why would they pull him then from those 11-11? Like, why did they sort of slow him down?
Because there's more bodies around the quarterback's legs. It's easier for him to get hurt. The center gets jammed up coming back out of center. Someone falls on his knees. So it's a precautionary measure because that is where he's more at risk compared to 7-on-7 where you have someone snapping the ball or you have him in shotgun. So the risk is minimal there in the 7-on-7 and in the individual work compared to in the teamwork.
So, but the point that you were making there, that whatever the team doctors' their prognosis was, the schedule was, that they won't deviate from it. That's to me the key thing here, because what you can't do is, and I understand, I get if you're an Eagles fan, you're like, man, we were 13-3 last year. Had we been 12-4. We're not Super Bowl champs, most likely, because they've been 12-4. They don't have home field advantage. They are on the road against Minnesota instead of Minnesota coming there. The whole world is different. And how many times on this show already have we talked about the depth of the NFC? That what you do in week 1 against Atlanta absolutely could be the difference between getting a bye and not getting a bye. I understand the importance of that opening week game, but nothing's more important than the overall health and trajectory of number 11, who is, you could argue right now, it would be the number 1 pick if every player was available, new league, who's your number 1 overall pick to start a franchise? It might be Carson Wentz. So you have to be uber cautious with him. C's point that they are being incredibly cautious and still planning to play him week 1, assuming that's the case, then I don't think this injury affects them drastically except for week 3 preseason reps, which Nate Sudfeld who played pretty well yesterday actually, who might get more of an opportunity to show the league what he can do.
Are either of you concerned with how Nick Foles played yesterday? It seemed like timing was a little off. He was a little rusty. Were you expecting a little bit more from what you saw, or was it too small a sample size?
No, I know who Nick Foles is. I know what happened in the NFC Championship game with Minnesota. He caught fire, and that continued into the Super Bowl. I don't have starter expectations for Nick Foles. So, no, I'm not surprised at all. based on what they were trying to do offensively. They got a little seepage in the offensive line, so he got some pressure. All quarterbacks, when they get pressure, are not as good, but it's not as if I expect Nick Foles to light it up. Like, we know what Nick Foles' limitations are, and just because you're Super Bowl MVP, I'm not changing that. That's who Nick Foles is. He's going to be inconsistent, and that's what we saw last night.
This type of hit you see relatively often in NFL games where the guy comes off the blind side, quarterback is getting ready to throw, and it's always shocking to me as a guy that didn't play that whenever that happens, my arm's going forward and a monster pulls it backwards, that you don't have this type of result where the quarterback is knocked out of the game. It's shocking to me we don't have more injuries like this. Now, the Eagles were very cagey about what the actual prognosis is. Sore shoulder. Like, was it a subluxation? Was it a dislocation? Was it simply just a strain? We won't know that until later today or tomorrow.
Yeah, I think if it was more severe than that, I think that they would have led on to that. And I think the NFL would not allow that to happen, especially if his shoulder came out of joint. I think we would know that. I think that there is some type of muscle strain, and it's not more significant than that.
All right, we got to take a break there. Coming up on the other side, why isn't Dez on the Browns quite yet? That's next. This is First Things First. Tonight on Fox, the Big Three playoffs are live from Dallas. Catch Drew Gooden, Nate Robinson, and other stars as they hit the hardwood with a trip to the championship on the line. It all begins at 8 Eastern on Fox, or stream it live on the Fox Sports app.
I got Tri-State plus 4.5 tonight. I think they pull off the upset. 5-3 against 7-1 Power, Chris Anderson and others. I think Nate Robinson propels his team to the championship, if anyone wants that part of the action. I got him plus 4.5. The line's moved a little bit since I bet them early in the week.
I don't even understand what I would be getting if I was like, I want in on the action.
I know.
I don't even understand.
It's trouble. Listen, I will not gamble on preseason NFL football, but I will gamble on the Big Three playoffs. Absolutely.
All right, put me down for 5.
Sure, Jenna.
Yeah.
No problem.
I'm out of the gambling business. I'm calling games now.
Oh, you can't. Oh.
Zip it.
That's a bad beat for me.
Time for some stories to start your morning. Big Ben is already out of the concussion protocol after a scare in practice on Wednesday. Good news, he didn't have a concussion. Reports are he expects to resume football activity soon. Nick, that was quick. Still a scare for the Steelers, though?
I'm a little confused by the timeline of this, that he's in the concussion protocol and then instantly out of it. And so, I mean, they're saying he never had a concussion. That's obviously great news. Now, I guess they preemptively put him in the protocol, which is a little odd to me. But, yeah, it's great news for the Steelers, assuming this is accurate, that he never had a concussion, that he's fine now.
And you can't make any mistakes as far as any injury dealing with the brain. And right now, football-wise, we're going to err on the side of caution. So put him in the protocol early. Did he have the symptoms of a concussion afterwards? I don't think so. That's why they removed him from the concussion. But Ben, he knows enough about pro football to realize how important it is for the proper diagnosis.
All right, to the Raiders now. John Gruden had high praise for his dancing quarterback. He said Derek Carr has mastered the Raiders' offense better than he has. Yeah, a little tongue-in-cheek. But, CC, do you expect Carr to have a bounce-back year this year?
What I do expect, though, is John Gruden going to be the master of hyperbole this year, though. You're talking about putting some yeast on stuff and everything. You're going to be getting plenty of sound bites from Coach this year, all right? He's trying to impress people and everything. Oh, yeah, this guy knows more football than me. Stop, Coach. Like, stop. Carr should bounce back, and if he doesn't bounce back, it's going to be a huge indictment.
See, what's he doing? What's this?
He's really trying to move his body in all directions in the pocket so he doesn't have one dominant leg, so he can be able to push and go all around the pocket.
Okay, I like that drill. I've never quite seen that isolated on video like that. I like it.
I'm here to explain all that for you.
Jenna said the dancing quarterback, and I looked up. I was like, he is dancing. Listen, it is going to be critically important Derek Carr has a bounce-back year, especially as long as they don't have Khalil Mack. Like, if this team doesn't have Khalil Mack, you all of a sudden have arguably the least talent on defense of any team in your division, if not your conference. So you need a huge year from your dancing quarterback.
David Johnson missed all but one game of last season with a wrist injury. He's already starting to feel left out of the discussion of the top-tier running backs. Johnson says he feels forgotten. Nick, where does Johnson rank among running backs in the league right now?
I mean, he's certainly top 5, like based on the last year we saw him. Now, he's a guy we've only seen the one great year, but it seems like it's duplicable because of the way he did it, catching the ball out of the backfield and rushing the football, but with a team that doesn't have an elite level offensive line. So I would have to, I don't know precisely where, but he's certainly one of the 5 best running backs in the league as far as a dual threat guy.
Yeah, and nothing wrong with that type of ranking. The problem is when you miss time. People start talking about other guys, and especially when you look at the Rams, how they've emerged as one of the elite teams. Todd Gurley being a key part of that. They're in Los Angeles. If you look at Pittsburgh, they got a stellar franchise. So when you start looking at Zeke, he's with the Cowboys. So other teams with these dual threat running backs, they play in marquee markets or marquee franchises. That is the big difference between David Johnson and these other running backs right now.
All right, finally, John Elway is looking to address his backup quarterback situation after poor showings by Paxton Lynch. Elway says he wants to bring in a veteran arm. He was asked if Colin Kaepernick is an option for the Broncos, to which he basically said no. Take a listen.
Colin had his chance to be here. We offered him a contract. He didn't take it. So, you know, and as I said in my deposition, and I don't know if I'm legally able to say this, but, you know, he's had his chance to be here. He passed it.
Nick, you take a little issue with Elway's answer.
Yeah, listen, I don't take, at this point, we all know Colin Kaepernick's not going to play NFL football anymore. And that's unfortunate, but that's a reality. I don't take an issue with the Broncos not signing him now. He's been out of the league a couple years. I take an enormous issue with what John Elway said there because it is an intentional effort to mislead people. It's an effort to make, what he's saying is true in technically, but not practically. Yeah, you offered Colin Kaepernick a contract before he ever kneeled. They wanted to trade for Colin Kaepernick, who had $12 million guaranteed coming from San Francisco. The Denver said, we will only trade for you if you will cut that $12 million to $8 million. He said no to that. And then he was sitting for the anthem, then kneeling for the anthem. And then after that, he was blackballed in my eyes, but certainly he was crossed off the list for Denver. Like, what John Elway is saying there is disingenuous at best and outright intentionally misleading at worst. Like, when we offered him a contract, that's a different Colin Kaepernick than the one everyone has been talking about for the last season and a half.
Yeah, they all offered Brock Osweiler a contract. Houston offered him more money. Brock was actually upset. Him and Elway went at it. They had a heated exchange, and Brock left. He was a disaster in Houston, Cleveland, anywhere else he went. He came back. They offered him another contract, and he couldn't play. So, to me, it's, John, don't play yourself, man. All right? There's a reason why they called you to Chicago for the deposition, too. All right? The collusion case, don't look good. Because right now, I know how teams, when they look at roster spots, they look at who is available for every spot. They have a board, all right? It might be a little fancier now. It might be on a computer. But they have a list of players that are available today in case you get. I guarantee you Philadelphia have a list of quarterbacks in case Nick Foles, if he had a serious injury, they would have a list of guys who they would call. Colin Kaepernick is not on Denver's list because they're not trying to get the best players. All right? Eric Reed is not going to get an interview. Colin Kaepernick's not. So at this point, the Denver Broncos, tell your fans this. All right? I'm not trying to get the best players available. I'm going to get the players that match up with me and the ownership and whatever our politics are. And that's the reason why Eric Reed and Cap are not gainfully employed with the NFL team right now.
And all of the excuses that don't have to do with the kneeling that apply to Cap, stylistically, oh, he's a quarterback, oh, he wants to, none of them apply to Eric Reed, and Eric Reed is just as unemployed. Like, Eric Reed's not a huge name, so we don't talk about it as much, but what's happening to Eric Reed is shameful. But one last note on this from me. Like, the laughter there, to me, was a little stomach-turning. Why did you give a deposition? Because right now there's a pending court case trying to determine whether or not the country's most popular league, its ownership, colluded to deny someone employment. That's not a laughing matter for Colin Kaepernick. That's how he was going to make his living into his late 20s and early 30s. And that door is closed to him. And to laugh and giggle about it while you're talking about why he had his opportunity just to try to contribute to the misinformation surrounding him. I mean, I would have thought John Elway's better than that. Like, should be. He's one of the greatest players in the history of the league. He's a champion as a player and a general manager. And to laugh and giggle about that, I thought was distasteful.
Google Chad Kelly, Jim Kelly's nephew, and Google back to high school and the trouble that he had in high school, the trouble that he had in Clemson, the trouble that he had in Ole Miss, and the trouble that he's had since he's been in the league. And he's been offered multiple contracts, and he can't play. But he's all right being on Denver's roster. I mean, so if they're cool with that, then I'm cool with it. But
Chad Kelly also moved up to number 2 on the depth chart.
Right.
He already passed Paxton Lynch.
Right.
All right, let's move on. It is week 2 of the preseason, and as of this sentence, Des Bryant is still unemployed. He met with the Browns yesterday. Apparently, all issues were not squared away, because after that meeting, Des said he still, quote, has some stuff to work out. As a refresher, Des turned down a 3-year, $21 million deal from the Baltimore Ravens. CC, what did Des Bryant need to show the Browns at their meeting yesterday, and what else needs to happen? Why does there need to be another meeting?
Well, I mean, these things, they do take time. And it's not going to make one bit of difference if he signed on Thursday night or if he signs on Saturday. He's not going to be there this week. All right, they have a game on Saturday, all right? So it's not going to matter until Sunday or Monday, because that's when the next week's work weeks start to build, try to get him a couple preseason games in. I think, first of all, do we want this person in the building? And I think from a conversation standpoint, if the coaching staff does not have anyone that has interacted with Des or been on a staff that coached Des, then they have to go on the intel that they've gathered. So in that intel that they've gathered, Des has to be able to prove that the stuff that was good, yes, that is me. The stuff that there is bad, because everyone does have bad intel on them, and that stuff is not a big deal to prevent me from joining this roster. I think from a focus standpoint, showing Mr. Dorsey and showing the staff there that he is ready to play football mentally and physically in whatever role that they want him to play. If that's being the third receiver, the second receiver, that means catching one ball game. If it means blocking, I would let those people know that I'm down for that for this 1 year. But it takes time. When you've never met a person, you just can't think. He comes through the door, you meet him, you say hello, and then they sign a contract. It's a little more extensive than that.
But we do often see guys the day they get there sign their deal. And I mean, we talked yesterday that we thought it was on the board that by the time we were on TV this morning that Des would have signed with Cleveland. I think it's risky for Des to have left without agreeing to terms there.
I think we don't know what happened.
Right.
And for us to be
Clearly
concerned that something is negative, that I think that's the wrong approach to take. All right? Just because he didn't sign on Thursday doesn't mean that Cleveland is moving forward. Cleveland got $53 million, all right, a salary cap. They need a wide receiver. There was no rush to put the pen to the paper on Thursday if there's other information. What if they have to look through the medical? All right? He did have to pass a physical. What if you have to go through all the x-rays and everything that Des of his previous injuries, which is a typical situation that you go through.
But what do you think's more likely here? That the Browns wanted to sign then and there and Des said, I need time? Or that Des wanted to sign then and there?
I think we're doing the wrong thing trying to figure out what was said in the meeting. Besides getting to know each other. If there's not people familiar with the athlete in the building, there is a feeling out process before you even offer him a contract. And then you have to negotiate, all right? There's no one taking the first offer. I don't know anyone taking the first offer. So when does that period start? Did he say, you know something, we'll make an offer to you tomorrow, which could have been this morning. So we don't know that, and trying to figure that out, I don't think we're going to be able to do that.
Go ahead, Jenna.
Isn't there some, I know this is not your favorite word, but some pressure on both sides because time is winding down and the season starts in a couple weeks? Like maybe this is something in a normal process that would take a couple weeks, but because Browns need a guy to come in and, I guess, learn the system, Des needs to get back into sort of that football mentality a little bit in with the team. Could that speed up the process? There
is a certain amount of pressure, but I like the way that John Dorsey has done things in Cleveland. And I would much rather err on waiting before I make a mistake compared to rushing and doing what people think is the right thing. If there's a certain amount of intel on the player that I need to get, that's the most important thing. So that part shouldn't be Russ. Does he fit into our culture? They have not won a game. Dez is an explosive personality, and I would not try to rush into bringing him in when I don't need him at the facility until Monday.
And the timeline of that is important because they play this weekend and because they won't get into their next work week until the day after the game. I understand that part of it, that even if he did sign yesterday, that he's not really getting to work with the Browns until Sunday at the earliest, but probably Monday. And as far as John Dorsey's history, John Dorsey has shown he doesn't mind edge players, as you would call them. Like we saw the types of players he brought in Kansas City, guys with what I would consider much greater off-the-field concerns than Dez Bryant. If you have talent and he thinks the coach can work with you, he doesn't mind bringing you in. Maybe I set my expectations at the wrong level because I know you have to negotiate contracts and you don't take a first offer. But we do see on the first day of free agency all the time, guys on their first visit, it lasts 6 hours because the last 3 hours is the agent and the GM hammering something out, and they don't leave the building without agreeing to a deal.
The reason why, between the end of the regular season and when free agency opens, I have a chance to get all that intel. I get all their medical information. I get all that stuff. So when it strikes midnight, I'm ready to spend my money.
Right, but I guess so. Maybe I'm missing something here. The Browns have had free agency's now been open since Dez Bryant's been cut a few weeks into free agency. Like they
weren't looking at Dez. They had Josh coming back. They thought he was going to come back and have a full season with a full training camp. They took a big chance on Callaway. They made the big purchase of Jarvis Landry. So their receiver intel, they were spending it on their players. So looking outside of that and saying, wow, why didn't they study Dez Bryant? They didn't have a need to study Dez Bryant. And let's not forget they had a high draft pick in Corey Coleman, who they just gave up on and traded. So the time process is I would just pump my brakes. Just relax. It's all right. The Browns play Saturday. All right? Dez, I still believe, will sign with the Browns.
Just real quick before we stop, do you think both Baker Mayfield and Jarvis Landry are two players on this team the Browns, Dorsey, maybe Hugh Jackson, will talk to and consult with about playing with Dez Bryant, or this is going to be just a Dorsey issue?
The players don't matter that much, all right? The players believe in Dorsey. Dorsey brought those players in. So Cleveland, they're trying to create a culture. They don't have a culture. Before you start asking, I believe John Dorsey has been in enough NFL locker rooms. He's running that franchise.
Yeah.
All right? And Baker Mayfield doesn't know anything about Dez Bryant. Why would you ask a guy who knows nothing? Like, I wouldn't ask him. All
right, let's take a break. Coming up, do the Jets have a quarterback controversy on their hands? Got something to talk about now. That's next on First Things First. Back here on First Things First, we welcome in former head coach Eric Mangini. Hey, Coach, how you doing?
Coach, good. How are you?
We were doing a little competition in the commercial break. Who knows the most about football?
No, that is
I laid out, and
Nick won.
Turns out Nick.
Yeah.
Nick knows more about football than
this is evidently going to be the
Cris.
theme of the show, so I might as well just air the laundry. I paid Cris Carter a compliment this morning because a point he had made off the field about football to me was proven out true last night. I was like, man, it always surprised me how much you know about football, and he's turned this into this. My partner just found out today. I know a little bit about football. Coach,
well,
I just found out today. You know a little bit about coaching.
He did say he proved it last night. You've been together for a year.
You weren't even there, Coach.
I would just say it's...
This is unbelievable.
All right, let's talk about football then, because that seems like a really good transition. The Jets were in action last night playing Washington. Sam Darnold got first-team reps all week and the start last night. He played the entire first half. Didn't go quite as well as his first preseason game, 8 of 11 passes, 62 yards and a pick. Head coach Todd Bowles has yet to name a Week 1 starter, saying the quarterback situation remains cloudy at this point. Here is the quarterback, Sam Darnold, after last night's game.
I thought I did pretty well, and it was fun to get back out there, but obviously, there's some things to correct. Some plays that we'd like to have back, but we don't think like that. We move forward, we watch the tape, and then we get ready for New York. That's for the Giants. That's how we do it.
He had to distinguish between playing his own team again and playing the Giants. All right, Coach, you watched that second preseason outing of his. Do you think he's any closer to that starting job because of what you saw in that game?
I think he's whatever you want him to be. So if you want him to be the starter, then he's closer. He grew, he was efficient, you know, whatever list of reasons you have that he's a starter. If you don't want him to be the starter, you say that he completed a bunch of short passes. He completed a slant, he completed a little snag route, a little flat route, he got sacked 2 times, he threw an interception. So wherever you fall on the we want him to be the week 1 starter is how you're going to evaluate that. He played against better competition, but it's not like they actually forced the ball or really pushed the ball down the field. There was a lot of easy throws and catches, get him started type things. So to me, this isn't about how much he grew or didn't grow. He's in the second preseason game of his first season, so it's going to take time. It's just what you want the stats to show. And look, when you watch the New England game and you realize that could be our starter, and then you watch New England starter, you realize how far he has to go.
Right.
Yeah, now, I think what you're saying is if this was an open competition, you might be looking at it differently. But it's based on they drafted this kid, they put the money into him.
The owner wants him.
The owner put a stamp on him, and ultimately it's when they love you in the NFL, you can't do nothing wrong. When they question or they don't like you, you can't do nothing right. So what Coach is saying is they have a very simple game plan for the young kid. Now, what he faced from Washington was a little bit different. They did change up the coverages. They did play some man-to-man. And that front 4, especially those 2 defensive tackles, Washington gave them some problems up front. Now, I didn't see him get careless with the football. I didn't see his pocket awareness was very, very good. And when people were in his face, I didn't see him make bad decisions. Any quarterback, Tom Brady, Matty Ice, Drew Brees can throw an interception. When you have man-to-man and you have the running back, he checks on the side, and the guy who was guarding him, he drops into coverage. So on the interception, he didn't even see that guy. That guy was supposed to be in coverage, dropped off into the pattern, tipped the pass, which led to an interception. So that I won't hold him.
And the interception should be noted for the audience that didn't watch the game. It was on 4th down, so it's not a play where you can throw the ball away or take a sack. Like, you've got to try to make a play in that
Right,
spot.
but in 4th down, though, there's still the defensive lineman. He still could have reset and gone somewhere else.
Sure.
And that's where you see the young, immature quarterback deciding, okay, I am going to try to gun it in there, and didn't see that, and someone got their hand on it. So I like where he is. There's a lot of things that people don't see in the game as far as the fundamentals, getting the right play called, right protection, and how quick he recognized what type of defense was. He's also very, very accurate, even though the throws were short, very, very accurate on those throws.
But the reality is, if Sam Darnold was a 3rd-round draft pick,
Correct.
he'd never be starting in this game, and he would have been finishing out the 4th quarter, and you would have looked at his production and said, yeah, okay, this is pretty good. He's developing. He might be our 3rd, but because he's who he is and they want him to start week 1, then we're going to get excited about his, 8 or 9 short completions that he had.
And by the way, the yards per attempt, even though in the first preseason game he didn't have the interception, the yards per attempt have been right around 6 or right below 6 in both of his preseason games. Like, it's been a lot of dinks and dunks like you're talking about, essentially. And by the way, in both preseason games, Teddy Bridgewater's been very good. In his first preseason game, Teddy Bridgewater was excellent statistically. Yesterday, in extended action, he was, 10 of 15, 130 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. I mean, he was quite good himself yesterday as well. So the open competition part is critical because it is not a spot where Bridgewater and Darnold started in the same position. Because if they had, Bridgewater would be the guy who's going to start the 3rd preseason game and on track to be your starter without question. If it was a blind stat no, well,
it's not an open competition. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater is not part of this competition. He is the 3rd quarterback or a guy that's going to be traded. I mean, that's the reality of where he is. But Teddy should have played better last night. He's played 5 years. He's a former Pro Bowl quarterback, and he's playing against the lowest part of the roster. So if he didn't go out and perform at a high level, that would be a really big problem. Now, he has looked good. I'm excited for him. I'm glad he's come back from the injury. But this is a 2-man competition with really a 1-man competition, but you paid the other guy $10 million, so you might want him to start early.
Yeah, there is no fairness on NFL rosters. People, I know young players, they used to come to me all the time, be like, man, it's not fair. I feel like I'm just as good as this guy. I'll tell them, hey, man, follow the payroll. You want to see fairness? The fairness tilts toward the payroll, all right? There's more things slanted towards the people making a bunch of money and Sam Darnold being at the top of that with the Jets roster.
But, Coach, yesterday you made an interesting point that no matter what you choose, the players know who the best quarterback is. And the players will know if you put a guy out there who didn't necessarily earn that position. And how do you factor that into?
Oh, yeah, they completely know. And then they also know who writes the checks. And if the owner wants the guy to play, they also realize that you may be in a situation where that guy has to play. And it'll never be said. It'll never be spoken about in any way. But the guys know, like, okay, this is who they want to play because of where he was drafted.
What are the negative repercussions in a locker room for that situation?
You can lose the locker room.
Yeah, you have that component. And if you're telling guys, and then this was always a hard line to walk, we're going to play the best players.
Yes.
And you keep saying that if you compete and you win, we're going to play the best players. So I drafted Vernon Gholston, and he was the 4th overall pick, and he was not playing very well. And I was not going to play him. And there was no, and it's hard because you have to go and say, we drafted this guy. We believed in this guy. You've paid him a lot of money, but he's not what we thought, so he's not going to play. And that doesn't sit well with the people above you. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to commit to something in a locker room, you better commit to it, and you better stand by it, or all the players are like, okay, that's what you're saying, but that's not what you mean.
And this is where, correct me if I'm wrong here, this is where a coach that doesn't have, not that anyone has ironclad job security, but Todd Bowles is closer on the hot seat.
Bill does.
Well, correct. Well, Belichick does. That's a great point. And it's one of the reasons he can make these types of tough decisions with regularity. Not that they're ever drafted at the top 3, but
also one of the reasons he has it is because he's made those tough decisions with regularity.
They're consistent.
And so, right, which helped him earn it, helped him create the culture. But the point I'm making, if you're Todd Bowles, I think most fans are sitting here thinking the way Todd Bowles keeps his job is win as many games as possible, which would mean put the best player out there. If that's Teddy Bridgewater, whomever, I think what you're saying is for Todd Bowles, the person he has to make happy is the guy who owns the team, the guy who can fire him. Everything else is secondary.
And the players realize when you're a top 10 pick, you realize you haven't had a quarterback a long time. You're looking for a franchise. The guys know that it's skewed toward this guy. So it's not as if Todd Bowles is going to lose the team because of Darnold. They've been around the league to know that, man, a guy like this, USC, he is going to play. Sidebar, I got to take a little responsibility for the Vernon Gholston thing. Ohio State guy, we got the most of him. He was a bust, but he's a guy from Detroit.
Yeah,
all right? Like our staff member, the reason why he was a bust when he got the prime time.
I can tell you that was not for lack of research. The guy just broken Mike Vrabel's sack record.
Yeah.
He was a junior. I mean.
Yeah, we lied to you, though.
Yeah.
He was a workout warrior.
But it's my fault for not realizing how much you lied.
Yeah.
Coach, stick around. Coming up, to Tom Brady prove he can win no matter who he has around him. That's next time.
We coach too much, Coach.
Someone that knows something about football.
Tom Brady's quest for a 6th Super Bowl ring got underway last night in his preseason debut. Wasn't one of those don't blink, you might miss his only series situations either. Tom Brady played the entire first half, went 19-26 for 2 touchdowns, completed passes to 7 different receivers, including Cris Carter, who was at home on his couch minding his own business last night. That's how accurate Brady was. He said words after the game. They sounded like this.
Who's ever out there, whether the last 3 weeks, you're just trying to get on the same page. You know, we're not doing a ton of game planning for these games, and it's just some trust. And, the preparation is mostly about us. But who's ever out there, we got to go with. And I'm sure it'll be that way at different points in the season. New guys will come in and got to try to get them ready. And obviously all the reps we put in with, Julian, Hogs, Gronk, guys who have been here in the past are very helpful. But everyone's just trying to get up to speed, and we're trying to all do the right thing.
I mean, Tom Brady, we didn't really prepare. We didn't even know what we were doing. I didn't know who I was going to throw the ball to. I wasn't sure if I was wearing pants or not, but we went out there and then we just did the thing that we always do. What impressed you the most about seeing Tom Brady last night, Coach?
Well, when you hear him talk about it, whoever's out there, we're going to go with. We got to get on the same page. We didn't game plan a lot. They didn't game plan a lot. We're not talking about, oh my God, we got to get Tom Brady more help. Maybe we can trade for Khalil Mack. Is Khalil Mack available? We got to get
shade.
If we can,
Aaron Rodgers
if we can just get there is no Aaron Rodgers shade.
Waiting all week in the airport. I never heard that.
This is the angry sitting at the airport delayed.
Yeah.
Takes to get off.
And another thing feeling about Aaron Rodgers?
It's not Aaron Rodgers specific. It's the whole idea of to whom much is given, much is expected, and he holds up that end of the bargain. And whoever's there, if you run the system that you're supposed to run and you read the coverages and you're in the right place, good things happen, and that's not surprising. And to see them be that efficient in his first extended action is not surprising at all.
It's always nice to see what Tom can do with receivers, running backs that other people couldn't do stuff.
Yes.
I mean, it's just Cordell Patterson. He was a great talent coming out of Tennessee. Went to JUCO as a highly ranked high school player, but never has really been a receiver. Minnesota drafted him first round. Oakland, he was in Oakland. They spent money on him. He's only been a kick returner. What is Tom Brady able to do with him? Now, this is not saying they're not going to be game plan specific, but when they get rushed or they get people they feel they're going to get pressure, they run a lot of the things that they ran last night. Now, it's not game plan specific, but they did do things that would combat Philadelphia putting pressure on them. That offensive line, there's not a lot of marquee names there. There's not a lot of, just high draft picks on that offensive line, and what he's able to do with those players. They always seem like they're playing at a different speed than the defense. And that was probably the most impressive thing, what he's going to get out of other players in the NFL that other franchises couldn't. And Tommy always seems like he's at a uptick more so than the defense going against him.
And this is why the Patriots are able to consistently avoid the free agent overpay, is because they don't worry about losing Dion Lewis, because they say we will find that production somewhere else. They don't worry about losing Danny Amendola. They don't say, well, Brandon Cooks was our leading receiver last year. We know what the receiver market pays. He was a good guy. Like, we've got to pay. No, okay, fine. We can find 80% of that production for 20% of the money. And some teams that are not able to do this, either because schematically, quarterback situation, or both, if you have highly talented productive players, you almost have no choice but to, once their contract's up, got to keep them, right? Like the ability of New England to consistently find ways to ask guys to only do what they do best and to try to exacerbate their advantage in those spots allows them to be so nimble in the offseason.
Why do the Patriots do that better than anyone else?
That's the.
Well, but when we talked yesterday and you're advocating for going to get a bunch of high-priced free agents, and then on the flip side you say, well, New England's able to do this. It's available to anybody. It's about hard work. It's about discipline. It's about being committed to something that's bigger than yourself. It's about the idea that we is greater than me. Now, all those things are fundamentals of football, but they're really hard to do. And they're not fun. They're not fun. Was Philly having fun last night? New England seemed like they were having fun last night. It's a hard, challenging thing to do on a consistent basis, but it's what's right. And in the era of everybody's brand needs to be the most important thing, well, the brand should be winning. The brand should be team, and New England does that better than anybody else, and that's why they don't have to pay a bunch of guys to come in and do it for them.
New England is the only team. They're the only team that can get away with it. There is no other team. We have seen this model with Bill, and you know that. You said it. Man, it's hard to duplicate. No one's going to be able to do it that way. No one's going to have a starting running back in James White, Super Bowl MVP James White. Last year, man, he was a second, a third, a fourth note. They highlighted Dion Lewis last year. And James White didn't say a word.
And should have been Super Bowl MVP.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
He scored 20 points in the Super Bowl. Right.
I mean, people know, but Brady is the quarterback, but people know James White and what he did in that game. But he comes back, Belichick puts him back, man, you're the starter. He's the featured player last night. Doesn't say a word. They can only do that in New England because that is the New England way.
Right. I think, Coach, I think it's what you're describing is very simple, but sometimes things that are very simple are incredibly difficult, as counterintuitive as that might be. Because if it were easy, then It wouldn't be the New England way, it'd just be the football way, the NFL way. Like, everybody's doing this. And so you mentioned yesterday that me advocating for the Khalil Mack to either get paid or the Packers to go get him. I do think for the vast majority of teams, the number one predictor of how successful you're going to be is how much high-level talent do you have?
Yes.
How many game-changing players do you have? New England has found a way to consistently do it for nearly 20 years now, a different way. But nobody else has been able to do it. Nobody else has been able to duplicate that model exactly.
Well, what's the saying? Everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. And look, Cris became a Hall of Famer because he was willing to work hard when other people weren't willing to work hard. Everybody says, I want to be rich, or I want to be successful, or I want to be the greatest athlete, but they're not willing to do what it takes. It is a simple formula, but it's not easy. And owners and GMs and people have a tough time going through all the turbulence it takes to get to the other side. You know, we talk about it with owners, like sometimes they want you to cook a turkey, but they want it cooked in the microwave. It doesn't taste the same. It takes time, it takes discipline, it takes effort, and it takes character.
A great quote from Bill Belichick this week was, 31 teams in the NFL, they do the Nick Wright model. They try to acquire as much talent as possible, and that's what has worked. Bill Belichick said, I'm not obligated to have great talent. I'm obligated to put a great team on the field. And that's what we see year in, year out with the New England Patriots. A team that is a great team with good players.
And the saying, too, there was, we're not in the business of collecting talent, we're in the business of building a team. And that was always the approach.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern. For Cris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolfe. So long, everybody.